Pokemon Champions is one of the most exciting things that the Pokemon Company has announced in recent memory, but we don't actually have that much information, which has left me with some critical concerns. First of which is metagame rotation. Generally speaking, the VGC format increases in power over the course of a generation, starting with only regular Pokemon available in the base game, then allowing powerful legendaries or non-native Pokemon to be transferred from past generations. Then this all resets when a new game comes out. They could keep this in Champions, directly linking the formats to whatever the Gen 10 games use. But I suspect that part of the reasons we're getting Champions is so that the core series games can experiment more with the battle system without ruining things for all of us who love playing turn-based competitive battles. So they may not be able to follow the main games forever. In that case, Champions will need to come up with its own way to cycle formats. The most likely case is that they keep doing whatever they do now, gradually increasing the power levels and reset it whenever new Pokemon game comes out, repeating this cycle ad infinitum. The biggest fear is that the power level never resets and we end up playing restricted formats forever, but this is pretty unrealistic, so my actual biggest fear is that they only ever provide restrictions based on power level and never restrict which low and mid-level Pokemon are available. How it has worked for a long time now is that year 1 of a generation is just the regional decks of the new games. Year 2 introduces transfer Pokemon, and Year 3 introduces restricted Pokemon. Without our regional decks, that first year of the format might look very different, making the variety between individual metas dependent solely on the new Pokemon that get introduced to the generation, and whichever generational gimmicks are legal. I think this would become pretty stale, and would hold Champions back in my view. We're already seeing repeat regulations in Scarlet and Violet with no changes, and while there are differences between regulations G and H 1.0 and 2.0 because there's no such thing as a solid Pokemon meta, I do not want to see formats repeated in Champions outside of special once-in-a-while formats that deliberately revisit fan-favorite formats for a short while. My hope is that they phase out groups of Pokemon from time to time to introduce more variety. This could be the highest usage Pokemon, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, as long as it shifts the meta enough to feel different. If you're excited for Champions and competitive Pokemon discussion, you should subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to continue making content for viewers just like you, and it's the best way to let YouTube know that that's what you want. Thank you. The next concern is not make or break for the game, but I think it's something that will go a long way in making Champions a more fun and complete experience in the long term. I want other metagames. For anyone who doesn't know, other metagames are formats hosted on Pokemon Showdown which allow you to use Pokemon in ways which are normally impossible. This includes metagames like Pokabilities, where a Pokemon can have all of its abilities at once, or Stabmons, where a Pokemon can use any move of any type that it has. Palafin could do Surging Strikes, for example. Or Tapu Koko could finally have good physical stab with Play Rough and Plasma Fist. While crazy metagames like Terra Override are very much out of the question, and we're definitely not seeing this at launch, I really think that getting some creative formats somewhere down the line would be very, very fun for the game, and I just hope it happens. This is probably just wishful thinking, but it would make me love the game a whole lot more, especially because all the cool metagames on Showdown are locked to singles, and I personally hate playing singles. So please give us at least almost any ability or something. But moving on to a more real concern. While we know EVs are able to be set manually, we haven't seen anything in the game mentioning IVs yet. The overwhelming likelihood is that they will be phased out of the game, with all Pokemon having perfect IVs in all stats. In fact, the Gardevoir we see in the promotional material does have the stats of a level 50 Gardevoir with perfect IVs. This, together with there being no visible mechanism to adjust IVs, implies this is how it will be, just everyone set to max. This is better than how IVs exist now, with no ability to adjust them downward, forcing players to mindlessly reset if they want optimal Pokemon with lowered attack, speed, or HP. While I personally think the ability to adjust your Pokemon stats for very specific interactions, like 4 attack IV Gothitelle or 21 speed IV Heatran, let me know if you know which teams those are from, is a part of team building that I don't want to see go away, it's an okay sacrifice if it means that part of the grind is gone. There is one possibility that scares me though. Pokemon can be transferred in from Pokemon Home, and if their IVs transfer over too, then we'll be in the same situation we are in now. This would be a generational fumble for Champion, as the ability to skip the grind that many people dislike in Pokemon, especially given the lack of transparency the game has when it comes to EVs and IVs, is one of the main appeals of the new game. Fortunately, we have trended towards in-game Pokemon being easier to competitively train for years, so we know the developers are aware of how rough things are in some cases, meaning there's gotta be no way that they mess this up. They're thinking about competitive players, they're thinking about us. They're not just gonna leave us behind like this. I just want confirmation that IVs are either dead or manually adjustable. Even if they aren't at launch, player feedback will probably make them change things in a patch down the line. Speaking of patches, Pokemon has never had balancing patches. Nerfs and buffs come when a new generation launches, changing some moves, effects, and Pokemon that were particularly strong in the prior gen. We saw this with Regieleki and Zacian getting nerfed when introduced to Scarlet and Violet. During a generation, there aren't changes made to rein in particularly strong Pokemon outside of bug fixes like we saw when Booster Energy Photosynthesis and Quark Drive got changed to be affected by neutralizing gas. The most we typically will see is Pokemon getting new moves when a DLC or new game releases. The infrequent nature of changes to individual Pokemon creates an ebb and flow within a given format where something becomes very strong, then teams adapt to those strong strategies, causing them to become weaker, and something else strong will rise up to take its place. This also allows players to discover techs that really disrupt the meta, like Chardy Berry on Charizard back in Sword and Shield. If we have balance patches, this core part of Pokemon will look very different, and I think whether it's good or bad comes down to frequency. If balance changes come too frequently, then I think it will take away from the team building skills of players that are able to build teams which can fight the dominant meta threats. But there are definitely things like certain max moves or Dark Void that probably would have been better off getting nerfed mid-generation. I hope they take it slow and only make changes in between formats at the very fastest. Also, this isn't really a concern, but I do hope we get Sleep Claws or a Sleep Nerf and Freeze just removed. My last concern is probably the most realistic and actually has nothing to do within the game itself. Right now, VGC tournaments are larger than they have ever been. Every year we'll see a new largest tournament of all time with well over 1,000 players. And if things keep going like this, it's only a matter of time before we begin to see things creep past 2,000 or 3,000. However, I do not personally believe that things can keep going like this. Tournaments have a logistical limit to how many people and players can realistically enter. Whether it be due to venue size, security concerns, or the amount of staff required to host giant in-person tournaments, there is some limit to the amount of people that can enter a tournament. Pokemon Champions is likely to bring the accessibility needed to get tons of people playing official competitive Pokemon, which is an incredible thing that I'm very excited for. But those people are going to need somewhere to play. And with how quickly tournaments fill up now before the release of Champions, it might be incredibly difficult to even get into enough tournaments to hit the best finish limit for Worlds. This is my biggest concern for Champions, but considering the existence of Champions implies that Pokemon is willing to invest more into the VGC scene, I think they will have something to address this that they are working on behind the scenes. Worst case, this affects Worlds 2026 and 2027, but after that, some necessary adjustments should be made if it becomes as big of an issue as I'm fearing. And that's it. Let me know what concerns you have for the game, if you agree, or if you think I might be making more out of these than there actually is. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like a video where I'm talking about whether or not competitive Pokemon is unfair. That being said, thank you very much for watching, good luck in your future games, and have a good one.